What did you make of his news conference last night and his remarks?
So I had the pleasure of being on a law school faculty with him 35 years ago, Delaware Law School. And at times we would sit together on the Acela train, even during my years when I worked for another network and I was going down to D.C. a couple times a month. That was a very different Joe Biden than the one we saw last night and the one we have seen in the White House. That Joe Biden would have a conversation with you like we're having now, would have a beer with you, would laugh with you, would joke with you, and he was cognitively absolutely with it. The present Joe Biden, as is manifested even in the Q&A with my friend Peter Doocy last night, where he confused Mexico with Egypt, the present Joe Biden, who so miserably and terribly impressed his own Department of Justice when they interrogated him, is a far different person. Is he mentally capable of exercising the presidency? Well, under the 25th Amendment, the vice president and his cabinet have the opportunity to make that judgment. It's the vice president and the cabinet. So if the vice president says no, this will never come up. If she says yes, it'll take a majority vote of his cabinet. That's easy. That's all. A simple majority vote of the 15 members of his cabinet. And they send that vote to the president pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and Kamala Harris becomes the acting president of the United States immediately.
So a lot of this falls on her then to make this decision.
It all falls on her, and she's not going to do it.
She's not going to do it.
For political reasons.
Yeah.
She's also not going to do it unless there's a majority of the cabinet that's going to go along with her. But if she does do it, and he is taken away from the presidency temporarily, he can sign a statement saying, I'm fine, I want the power back. It immediately comes back to him. If the cabinet persists and says, no, you're not fine, then it goes to the Congress. And it would take a 2/3 vote of both the House and the Senate to remove him and to make Kamala Harris, again, the acting president, not the president, the acting president, with all the power of the president. This cumbersome amendment, which has never been used before, this part of it has never been used before, was written in the aftermath of the assassination of JFK, when LBJ became president and there was no vice president. So there's another part of this amendment that talks about replacing the vice president. While they're at it, they decided to add this. Right. Never happened. My view is it won't happen again, but I understand the calls for it. The calls for it are absolutely appropriate at this time in light of what the Department of Justice said yesterday.
And yesterday, the Supreme Court also heard oral arguments on Donald Trump, the Colorado ballot case. So what do you expect to happen here? Because what we're hearing is it sounds like they would side with Trump from, again, just day one, what we're hearing.
When the argument first began, I thought it was going to be 6-3 to reverse Colorado. I now think it's going to be 9-0.
Wow.
I think the court is going to find an intellectually sound, non-political, very, very narrow way to say the voters will decide who the next president is going to be. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, you may like him, you may not like him, is a master at crafting a compromise that all justices can agree on. If it's non-political, it's not like they're putting their thumb on the scale to protect Trump. They're putting their thumb on the scale to protect democracy. Right. That also enhances the legacy of the court, so it's a win-win if they can do that.
What I thought was interesting, too, is some of the tough questions that the Colorado lawyers had to face came from you would say the left justices on the bench. They were asking, why should a elected Secretary of State be given the opportunity to take someone off the ballot nationally?
I mean, the answer to that question is, this has never been done in the modern era. When this amendment was first enacted, let's say John Glasgow wants to run for Congress. We saw him in a Confederate uniform during the war. We're not going to put his name on the ballot. That was enough to keep you off. But that was then, this is now. Today, our concept of due process, fairness to the candidate, is far more acute than it was then. It's hard to believe that anybody could be kept off the ballot because of an alleged aiding and abetting an insurrection without proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Can they prove guilt of Donald Trump's aiding and abetting an insurrection beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, they'd have to charge him first, and he hasn't even been charged with that.
Right.
We've been talking about this for some time now, and now you're saying it could be 9-0. Why is that so important?
So that the court maintains its legacy as being the guardian of the Constitution and above the political fray. If it were 6-3, we'd be like, the Republicans wanted Trump and the Democrats didn't. That's the last thing
it becomes very divisive.
That's the last thing the court wants.
Yeah.